Yeah, she's calling back. We're going to try to give her a call again, and then she just added another phone number to the 13-year-old grandson who's possibly with the daughter. Step out with this.
2412.
Veteran crisis hotline's calling in, so they have a female veteran off her medication. She's at work to safe haven. Attacking 12, take a check that one out.
6 Rumble, 2 point start, take your shot.
Officer still stands for talk? No. Offender in custody? Temporary with thanks. Anyone else close, wait to see result, let me know. 4235 end up just coming over with a domestic battery at 1815 North Winchester, 1815 North Winchester. Danny, the father and the owner of the vehicle. Alright, thank you. 111, 113,
1 Good morning, everybody, and good morning to our special guest this morning, James. Uh, I came across one of your videos with your trip to Moscow, and then as I got on your channel, I kind of discovered that, man, you're a foodie. You paraglide, you're mountain climbing, you're traveling. You even did van life for a period of time. I was like, wow. But your story is what really captivated me because after I got done watching that episode, I came across it from somebody else's channel. And I was like, wow, the courage and the strength with your story and your journey. Right then, I reached out to you on email and I was like, wow, I would love to hear more about your story. So thank you for joining. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
What a journey you've had so far. My gosh. What, like, Albania, what even like from Moscow to Albania, like what even?
Yeah. There's a connection there. My dad worked in Moscow, and one of his coworkers worked in Albania, and so that's why I had a connection with people in Albania. I had gone to visit in 2017, and then 2018 I was in New Zealand doing a road trip through New Zealand, and decided I didn't really want to live in the U.S. for a bit, just to experience a bit of the world. And so I was thinking about people that I knew that lived outside of the country, and they and whether or not they would have work for me. So I emailed people and applied for jobs in places that I knew or had some connection with, and then Albania happened to be the one that worked out for me. So I wasn't specifically looking for Albania. I visited and I liked it there, and I knew, okay, I could see myself living here, but I was just looking for an option outside of the US, anywhere really.
Really, just outside of the US, period.
Just somewhere, just to get, because I realized that, I mean, I traveled for a couple of years while I was living in Alabama, and I just, you realize how big the world is and how much there is to see out there. And so I thought, I've had enough of sitting around and delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut in Birmingham, Alabama. Let me go find something else to do.
Wow. So were you traveling before you? So you were traveling the world before you even moved?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I started the first international trip that I went on kind of by myself was to South Africa in 2013. I was there for 2.5 months. And that was in the middle of college. And then after college, I moved to Hawaii for a year. And being trapped on the island in Hawaii, I thought, it's so hard to get everywhere. How do I go to a place where it's easier to get around? And so I went to moved back to Alabama, moved in with my parents just to try to get my feet under me, and started traveling. And when I moved in 2018, I moved to Albania. I'd been to 19 countries, I think. And one of the reasons that I decided to go to Albania and to Europe is because it is easier to access other countries. And so since then, in the last 5.5 years, I've been to almost 20 more. I think I'm at 37 total countries visited at this point.
Holy wow. What inspired you? Yeah, that's crazy, because I haven't even been to that many states in the United States. What inspired you to kind of go down that path or journey, I should say, because really that's what it is. You're just exploring.
I think a lot of it was coming from Moscow, not wanting to associate with a lot of the things that happened in Moscow, and how do I like I wasn't born in Moscow. I was born in Alabama. My family came from the South to Idaho and then went back. And
Oh,
so I
wow.
didn't feel like I was ever from the Northwest. I didn't feel like I was ever from Idaho. And I thought it didn't feel like home. And so I was kind of on this search to find a place that felt more like home. And I would just go to a bunch of places and see what was there. And then I found I had a hard time maintaining friendships for very long. A lot of people would just kind of drop me by the wayside as they moved on to something better or different. And I found that when I traveled, I was meeting new people that I could have conversations with and I felt like they were interested in my life, even if it was just for like a 2-hour plane ride. We would talk and they felt more interested than people that I may have known my entire life.
Wow.
And so a lot of it was kind of that, where it's just that it was this dopamine hit of always meeting new people and them having an interest in what I was doing, more so than, I would go back after traveling to some country. I'd go back and people would barely even acknowledge that I had been somewhere else.
Wow. How old? Okay, so you moved from Alabama to Idaho. That's an interesting move in its own, because you're going from one part of the country to the other. But how old were you when you moved from Alabama to Moscow?
There was a few years in between. My family moved to Cambridge, England, because my dad was getting his PhD in England at the University of Cambridge.
Oh, wow.
And so when I left Alabama, I believe I was about 2 or 3, and then when I got to Idaho, I was about 6. And so it was this 3 years in England, and then so I ended up in Idaho at 6, and then moved away from Idaho when I was 18, just after high school.
Wow. So it almost, I suppose, in a small way, as a child, you almost didn't have a solid connection to a specific area already, because by the time you were 6, you had already experienced 3 different changes already in that period.
Right. And I mean, it's not this way because we have a federal government, but Idaho and Alabama could almost be different countries because of how different they are,
It
So
is,
you could
yeah.
almost argue that I was living in 3 different countries by the time I was 6, even though technically it was just 2.
No, it is true, because I went and spent some time there for a week last fall, and you could feel I could feel the difference. Everybody was very polite and kind and everything, to me. There was just, I don't know, it's you have Pullman and Moscow, and they're 2 little towns that are really a pretty decent way away from anything. And then
Yeah.
in those 2 little towns, everything is so compact and tight.
Mhm.
I could see, in one of your videos, you discussed in your childhood about you enjoyed living out, in the outskirts, because it was peaceful and it was just you, and there wasn't a lot of activity. And then when you came back, you had said that you had seen there a lot of houses had been built, and
Yeah.
things like that. So that, with how small it was, when you lived in Alabama, was it a small community like Moscow was, or
I
is it
don't
something
think
you don't
so.
really know?
I don't really remember when I lived
Yeah.
there when I was younger, but I don't think it was. I mean, my dad was the pastor of a church at that point, and so there was some level of community in that church. But I was so young, I probably never
Right.
left the house, so I have no idea what it was really like.
So was
Since
England the same?
since then I've been down to the area in which I was born, and it's just a suburb of Birmingham. It's not like a
Right.
small town or anything. It's just kind of on the farthest end of one side of Birmingham. And then England, we lived in Cambridge, which is a big city in and of itself. And it kind of was the same thing as far as I can remember.
So was it because of your father's occupation that you traveled from Alabama to England and then
Yeah,
to
he
Moscow?
wanted to study theology. He wanted to get his PhD in theology, and so then that's why we went to England, and then he got offered a job in Moscow, and so then that's why we went to Idaho.
Oh wow. Okay. And so so as your childhood, shout out to you again for your courage and strength, because if anybody's not familiar, definitely go sub to the link if you're not already. And the last 4 videos is just the recent journey that he's taken um, when it comes to his trip and the strength that it takes to face all that with the anxiety and the panic attacks and things like that. That had to take a tremendous amount of strength to do that and courage too. And it seems like you got a lot of things worked out inside your soul with that trip. So it was something that I suppose was needed and something that was refreshing too.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what that experience, and we don't have to go into it, but that experience, is that what kind of led you to then really travel beyond maybe anywhere locally that you have traveled? Were you traveling during that age when you lived there, or is that something that you
No,
just afterwards you just went ahead and did it?
yeah, and I think that might be part of why I enjoyed it so much in the in later years, was because um, in Idaho, I grew up in Moscow, and there's a town about 40 minutes south called Lewiston.
Mhm.
And almost the entire time I lived there, until the final year that I lived there, my senior year of high school, I didn't go further south in the state than Lewiston.
Oh wow.
We would go to Pullman and maybe go to Seattle for a flight or something else. But my traveling was very limited. I grew up in a big family, and so we didn't do family vacations or anything like this kind of stuff. Occasionally, my dad would take the boys of the family and we'd go camping or go do something else, but those were few and far between. And so I think the other thing is, if you grow up there, then everything feels really small. Everything feels really connected. You walk into a coffee shop and you know everyone in there. You walk down the street and you're always seeing people that you know.
Right.
And so I ended up going to college in Georgia, in North Georgia, to play basketball. And a lot of it was just like, let's go somewhere different, just anywhere different. Let's get out of this town and start seeing what else is in the world, right?
Right.
And kind of took one step at a time. So I moved across the country, and then after college, I moved to Hawaii, which is part of the U.S., but it at times feels like you've taken one step out of the U.S. because you get all the benefits of being in the U.S., but yet there's a different culture, there's a different history of that state. And so that was kind of like the next step. And then I got back to the mainland and started traveling around a lot and kind of taking more and more simple steps. The whole thing kind of was leading to, not in my head, I'm realizing this now, it was all kind of leading to me moving out of the US just to experience life elsewhere, through long extended trips places, through short trips places. And then just kind of, I've been, since I was 13, I think I've been moving. Like, I would get summer jobs that were like 5 hours away from Moscow, so I would go live somewhere else in northeastern Washington or northeastern Oregon and be away from my family. And it was kind of let me go experience this for myself. I think I did it when I was 13, I did it when I was 15, then 17, and then 18 I moved away. And so I was always testing the waters of seeing, okay, let me take another step outside of this like comfort bubble of my life and see how much bigger I can make this bubble. And so then moving to Albania, which is a very unknown country in most of the world, is a large step outside of that bubble. But what it's done is it's expanded that bubble of comfort even larger.
Yeah. So, like, how do you deal? Like, okay, so you didn't go on a lot of family vacations and things. So, really, from age 6 to 18, you were pretty much isolated in a small area, confined, I would say, to a small area, and then you were slowly, just tested to see. You don't want to make the jump too far. You're just kind of going, in steps. What being around all of your family? How big is your family first?
I am one of 10 children,
Wow.
all biological, no twins or triplets or anything like that. Just 10 individual pregnancies, 10 individual births. And I'm
Wow.
number 6. So I have 5 older siblings and 4 younger siblings.
Wow. So how so you're around your family all the time, you're not really exploring too much, or you don't see the outside world as much. I know what you mean when it comes, like you see the same person at Walmart on the same Tuesday and,
Mhm.
every month and this and that. Is it when you started to, like, when you first went to, like, Northeast Oregon and Washington, how was it being away from your family when you started to make those steps? Was that difficult, or how did you
Um,
handle that?
so when I was 13, I went with one of my brothers who was 15, and we went up to northeastern Washington and worked on a hay farm. And it wasn't so bad because it was only maybe a month and a half, and it was both of us together. So we have that shared experience, and we had each other to lean on, kind of. And we had
Okay.
these connections with the farmer there that we knew his kids that were in Moscow, and so we kind of it felt a little bit more familiar. And then Oregon was different because I went there by myself and lived with people that I met when I showed up there.
Oh, wow.
I went down to work on a ranch and got there, and the rancher said he didn't want me working on the ranch because I was too young. But he owned a restaurant, and I could wash dishes in the restaurant.
Oh,
And I
wow.
didn't feel like turning around and going back to Moscow, so I just stayed down there and did that. Um, and
Wow.
it definitely launched me into that one more so than when I was 13 in Washington. But the one in Oregon definitely launched me into this is what the real world is like. Um, this is how people act. I was living with guys who were either in college or just out of college, which is a pretty big gap, especially when you're a sheltered 15-year-old kid.
Right.
Um, and so, get introduced to like South Park or something like that, which is a show that I'd never heard of before that. And then
Right.
suddenly I'm watching this and I'm thinking, oh, this is weird. I've never heard of this. What's going on? Why is this, just little dumb things like that. But I enjoyed it because it was something new and different from the
Fresh. Yeah.
same old life in Moscow all the time.
Right. Yeah, like a
Yeah.
fresh, yeah, like you can finally breathe in a way.
Mhm.
Kind of feel that's interesting. So, um, not only from the small town, because because there is like a sheltered type life when it is these small, really small communities and things. But not only that, it was also sheltered inside the home too, where
Mhm.
you weren't even exposed to certain TV programs or probably music or other
Right.
things like that. Man,
Right.
that had to be when so you go out there by yourself, you're 15, you show up to do this job and they tell you that you're too young when you show up. You're living with people that you've just met. And coming from that, I can't imagine the wake up call you must have got, you know.
I,
Just
um, I I was, I don't know how much it was a wake up call because of the community that I grew up in. I was under the impression that my way of life was, my belief system and worldviews were better than everyone else's because that's kind of what I've been taught through school or whatever, or the people in the community. And so I went in there thinking, oh man, these people are so depraved. They're the worst people, you know. And by the end of the summer, I was like, actually, they're fine. They're a little bit crude with their humor, but being at 15, I was starting to find that kind of thing more humorous, And so it's just like, oh, these guys aren't that bad. I mean, some of them weren't great people, but it still like opened my eyes to, oh, you don't have to be going to the church that I went to when I was younger in order to be a normal, kind, generous, human being, which is kind of what my child brain thought was the case. It was, okay, there's this box and there's this box, and me and everyone that I go to church with is in this one, and anyone else that doesn't is in this one.
Right.
And then realizing that that's actually not the case at all. So that, I think that summer was probably impactful on me in figuring that out and understanding that, not only like understanding that it doesn't matter someone's background. If someone's going to be a nice person, they're going to be a nice person. If they're going to be a jerk, they're going to be a jerk, and it doesn't matter if they have worldviews that are similar to mine or not. And then also kind of my first experience of staying with, living with, interacting with strangers. And it was in a very, like, I was living with them. So it was almost this more intimate setting than just like sitting next to somebody on a plane, like we were interacting every day, had to deal with each other's leaving dirty dishes or any of this kind of thing.
Learn each other's traits and
right. And so, it was my first step into that whole experience. And I think that it probably was, it wasn't a great experience. Some of the guys were just not kind people at all.
Right.
And some of them were great. And so it opened my eyes pretty quickly to seeing, okay, just because they come from the same background doesn't mean they'll be the same. But also, I learned how to deal with that kind of thing pretty early.
Yeah, because if you're doing that at 15, because I was actually homeless before I even graduated high school, and so when you get exposed to a lot of ugly things out there when you're kind of thrown into that. Or not even thrown, but like, you're in a position where you're having to deal with more grown-up thoughts at earlier age than when most people would, I suppose. Because at 15, you're pretty much having to have the thoughts like an 18-year-old would when they're moving away. How long were you over there? Just for the summer?
Yeah, just for the summer.
Just for the summer. And so when you graduated, you moved to Georgia to go play basketball. What happened with your college? What happened with you graduate or
yeah, I went for 4 years, graduated. It was a Christian college, a Presbyterian college, and so at this point I have no problems with that, but I don't I wouldn't have minded not going to a Christian college. It wouldn't have mattered to me either way. This was just the place that I was able to play basketball, and so that's why I picked that school. And once basketball was over, the school didn't really mean much. I feel no kinship with the school. I met friends there, and I'm still friends with some of them. But the whole donating to your college means nothing to me, and I wish that they would stop contacting me trying to get me to donate, because I don't feel like the school actually did anything for me except for let me play basketball. So
that's funny. So after college, then you go back to Moscow, or
no?
Or how does that?
I left Moscow in 2010, and I haven't. I went back to visit my family when they lived there, but I haven't moved back there. After college, I lived in Chattanooga for the summer, and then Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then moved to Hawaii and did an internship at a church in Hawaii. But that was kind of a means to an end. It was okay. I can live on Maui for free and get paid a little stipend, and I just have to work at this church, but I get to live in Hawaii. And so then that's what I did for that year. Spent the whole time, adventuring, exploring around the island, and filming and taking photos and that kind of thing. And then after I got into that, I realized that that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to travel more. And so it's just difficult to do it from Hawaii. So I went and I moved back. And by that time, during college, my parents had moved from Idaho down to Alabama. And so that was kind of the place that I went to get my feet under me and kind of start building up from scratch what I was going to do.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. So your family's spread out now.
Now,
From
yes.
Moscow to Tennessee to Alabama. Wow.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. Um, and with Hawaii, so really exploring different cultures is nothing new to you. You were born in Alabama, you went to England, you went to Moscow, Hawaii, man, just different cultures, period. And it, like you said a little bit ago, that Moscow was different. Is it to you, since you've lived there, is it a different way with the state border? Like when you lived in Northeast Oregon and Washington, was it the same kind of, like you say, it's its own culture or own,
Um,
is it the
I would
same?
say,
Is it,
like in my head, when I like at the beginning of this conversation, when I mentioned that kind of Idaho and Alabama could almost be different countries, it
yeah,
was kind of the Southeast and the
the zone?
Northwest are kind of different countries, and even like Seattle is different. Like the West, the actual West Coast is different from like inland Northwest, where Idaho is.
Really?
But I feel like Northern Idaho, Eastern Washington, and Eastern Oregon kind of all have a similar
Vibe kind of
culture,
thing.
similar vibe. Um, it also is just, I mean, it's exacerbated by being in Moscow and being in this particular church community in Moscow that's closed off to everything else. And so I think that if you were in Moscow and then you go to Pullman or you go to a small town in Washington, you kind of feel like, oh, they're Northwestern. So it's kind of the same thing,
Okay.
unless you're in one of these like tight communities like we were.
Is
And so
the
what I experienced when I was younger in that community would not necessarily be the same as some random person living in Pullman or some random person living in Joseph, Oregon, or something like that.
so does the church have a lot of uh is there a lot of influence there then with it? Is
Um,
that
it was uh, kind of, and things have changed, and I've been I've been gone for a long time, so things might be different now. But
yeah.
when I was there, it was less of having influence in the community and more of telling the church community that we're better than other people, and so we don't associate with other people. And
Oh,
so
so
I
you didn't
I didn't
even
interact with
associate.
I didn't
Oh,
interact with any kids from public schools except through basketball.
really?
My friends were going to church with me, going to school with me. We all knew everybody else, that kind of thing. And so it felt like an even smaller town inside this
Wow,
small town.
yeah, because
Yeah,
it's only 20, 30,000 people, and
right.
then I think what, maybe 10, what would you consider the population, like, what would be the, like, percentage-wise population? So it's already a small town, 20 to 30,000, and then if you're just having, you're only able to socialize with your church community, how many people were in your church community at that time?
I would say probably less than 1,500.
Wow.
But I don't know exactly, but I would guess less. And now it's probably more than that because that same church has then planted other churches and they've probably attracted more people and whatnot. But when I was there, the church, the community that I was in was like a community of 1,500 people or less inside of this small town that was also small.
Wow,
So
so that had to
so
be
I grew up in a town of 25,000, but it feels like I grew up in a town of like
1,500.
middle of nowhere, yeah, 1,500, 2,000
Right.
kind of thing, yeah.
Wow, and so you probably didn't even go into town that much either unless it was for functions or whatever, and other than that, you probably were just out in
Right.
the country and
Right. So once I got my driver's license at 16 or 17, I started interacting with people more, would go play ultimate frisbee or play basketball. And those groups of people that would play those things were fine with other people coming to play with us that were outside of the church community that we were in. So I would interact with when I was 16, 17, 18, I would interact with other people that were different backgrounds than I would, in the rec center playing basketball or at the University of Idaho practice field playing ultimate frisbee or something like this.
mm,
Um, and it still felt different because I didn't feel like I knew them, but it was I would interact with them a little bit more.
Yeah, that had to be, man, I can't imagine, like, because see, I'm thinking like 20, 30,000 small, but when you compare it to just the community of your church and then how small it is, maybe 1,500 at that time, that had to be a scary step to, like, even that first step just to, like, go away. Though, like the one you spoke of with your brother, you still had a connection, in a way, because you could, literally at a second go back. Even with the job that you took in Washington too. But when it comes to going to college, that had to, I imagine that one was probably really scary, considering where you came from, and then you're really like across the country, you're by yourself.
I had visited that college once for a basketball camp the summer before I moved there. My grandparents at the time lived in Atlanta, which was 2 hours away from where the school was. And so when I went to college, I knew a couple of guys that were there from we all went to this basketball camp together. And then those were who I was going to be roommates with. And I didn't know anyone else in the school, had never been to the school during school session, knew nothing about the school itself. When I say I was there for basketball, I mean I was there for basketball, and that was it. I knew the basketball coach, and I had an admissions rep that talked to me once, I think. And so I knew this guy's name, but I didn't know anything about classes. I didn't know anything about even college curriculums at all, because it was not something that I was familiar with going in high school. And so it was kind of like a movie. My grandparents drove up. My granddad's driving this Cadillac. My grandma's in the front seat, and I'm sitting in the back, and I have 2 suitcases and a box of books. And I pull up outside of my dorm building. I unload my stuff, put them on the curb, turn around, and my grandpa rolls down his window. He's like, "You got everything you need?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." He goes, "Okay, see you at Thanksgiving." And he drives off. And I turn around, and it feels like a movie. I turn around, and I kind of standing with my bags and kind of look up at this building, and I'm thinking, well, here it goes.
Here it goes. Here we go.
Yeah. But I think that at that point, I was so ready to get away from the community that I had grown up in, that this was like, okay, it's a complete reset. Let me completely start over. I can be the exact person I need to be. I didn't tell people I was from Idaho. I would tell people I was from Alabama because I was born in Alabama. And when they found out my family lived in Idaho, it was this whole big, like, how do I explain this whole thing? But I wanted to disassociate from anything from Idaho, from Moscow specifically in Idaho, as much as I could, because I was kind of done with so much that had happened there.
Wow.
And then, like in my video, a lot of this traumatic stuff that I talked about, the mistreatment that I went through, I felt like I was finally in a place that I didn't have to deal with that anymore, and so I could leave it behind me. And it caught up to me in other ways, obviously, because I didn't handle it. I just ran from it.
Ran from it.
So yeah, so that, like, sometimes I wish I was making videos when I was in college so that I could look back and look at the beginning times there, which is kind of why I make videos now, so that I can look back at what was going on 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. But I do enjoy just kind of sitting back and thinking about, just like watching the memories play in my head of things that happened my first year of college, or conversations that I had of things that, you would expect 18, 19-year-olds to know, and me just having no idea how the world operated because of the environment that I'd grown up in.
Wow. Yeah. That had to be crazy. When did you start? Like, what made you get interested in filming and photography and that kind of journey?
That was in Hawaii. Before I moved to Hawaii after college, I bought a little GoPro because I thought, who goes to Hawaii without taking a GoPro with them? And I would just film random little things that I was doing and take photos of stuff. And when I started posting the photos, people enjoyed the photos. And it all started with me trying to build this Instagram page that I had at the time. And I think I built it to 20K or 18K or something like that. And then it got hacked by some Russian and I lost access to it. But in an effort to build that, I was doing all of these other things like this, that, and the other, taking photos, going to watch the sunset, going for an adventure, going on a waterfall hike, whatever, to take photos so that I could put it on Instagram so that I could build this thing that I was building, because this was in 2014 and 15. And I had already been talking to brands that were sending me like flip-flops or shirts or swim board shorts or sunglasses that I could take photos of and put on my Instagram, and they would give me free stuff. And so I thought, oh, okay, I can get these sponsors that I get this free stuff, and then use that to kind of build my following even more, and maybe someday they'll pay me for this. And so like in 2014, I was already trying to think of how can I make a living out of just doing fun things that I like doing, like taking photos and traveling and hiking.
Wow. So when did because I saw some videos that you did where you were doing the van life as well. When did that take place?
So just to be transparent, I've never actually lived in a van. I own a Volkswagen T4 camper van from 2000. And I own that now. It's in Albania, and I use it as a kind of like a weekend warrior travel van kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So I live in my apartment, but I have this van that I use when I go camping or when I travel. Then I kind of live out of it or sleep in it or this kind of thing. But for any true van lifers, I've never done true van life. I just kind of use it as my traveling apartment kind of. Yeah.
Hey, it's still part of it though.
Yeah, and that all happened in Albania. It was something that I thought about when I moved back to the U.S. or back to the mainland from Hawaii, but I just didn't make enough money, and I was busy building my YouTube channel and building videography business so that I could pay for stuff. And the van was so far out of my reach financially that I just didn't bother. So actually, when I lived in Alabama, I had a Subaru Outback, and I would travel and sleep in the back of that. Because it was long enough for me to sleep in, and I could kind of keep some stuff. So that was kind of like, again, like I'm very much into this, like, let's take a first step and see what happens, and then we'll take a bigger step if that works. And so I found out I did live in my Subaru for a little bit in Chattanooga the summer before I moved to Albania. But after a bit, I was like, I don't want to do this. And I found a friend that I would let me rent a room from him. And that's when I realized, okay, if I wanted to do van life, it would have to be this very particular size of van. I'd have to have these comforts in it. I can't just live out of a car. I wouldn't be able to do that. I could if I absolutely needed to, but I would rather live in an apartment than live in just a car. And so the big bulk of the van stuff has come since I moved to Albania, because that's where I was able to purchase this van. And so then I've been doing some modifications and kind of using it as my traveling hotel room, basically.
Yeah. Hey, it saves money, don't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's really convenient when I'm traveling. Even if I'm just going on a long road trip, I have a solar panel. I can plug in my camera batteries, my drone batteries, all of that can charge while I'm driving. And then I don't have to think about, where am I going to charge this? What am I going to do about that? You know, my solar panel is powerful enough to even charge my computer. And so then I set up a hotspot on my phone, and I can work from the middle of nowhere. And I've done that a couple of times, not super often, but you know, I have it set up nicely. It's not somewhere that you'd want to live full time, but it's a nice setup for a few days at a time, or even an extended trip.
How often do you travel then?
Most of my traveling since the pandemic, has been in Albania. And I'll often get, I'll often either go with friends, in which case I'm not sleeping in the van because I don't want to subject them to that. Or sometimes I would have partnerships with hotels that will give me a free stay, and in which case I don't really care to stay in the van.
Wow.
I would say a couple times a month I'm doing some trip in Albania, and then kind of depending on income level, depending on how much work I've had recently, I might take an international trip once every few months.
Wow.
And I mean, in Europe, you can get cheap flights. So, in the summertime, I flew to Rome for $30 or something like that.
What?
So if a flight is that cheap, I might
Wow.
sacrifice and do something like that. But I tend to wait until I
Wow.
have the money to make a trip before I even try to do it.
Wow, $30? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably an hour flight? It's
Yeah.
probably not that far.
It's an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and it's one of the like most uncomfortable seats, and you have to pay for anything on the plane. You have to pay for, all you get is a little backpack, that kind of thing. But if I'm just going for a couple days,
Right.
okay, I just throw my clothes into a backpack and it's fine, And even if I do want to pay for a more comfortable seat, it's like $10. It's okay. Now it's a $40 plane ticket. Oh no,
Right.
not that big of a jump.
Compared to here where it's like 2,000.
Right.
Something
Exactly.
like that. Man, that's crazy. So you travel, so that's pretty much, is that what you envision just from here on out, is just traveling and documenting and or do you have a bigger picture towards another phase, or is that
I do enjoy that. I really would like to plant roots somewhere. As you can see in my description, in my bio on YouTube, it says an every man's journey to find beauty in the mundane.
Yeah.
And part of that is I want to show people that anybody's life has beauty in it. Even if you're getting up and you're going to a cubicle every day or whatever, it's just maybe you're seeing the sunset, maybe you're seeing flowers bloom. Like there are beautiful things that happen. And I think that if I'm just traveling nonstop, it kind of doesn't help tell that message. And so my hope is to build a life somewhere, create roots somewhere, and then do some trips because that's what I enjoy doing, but also really build stuff build something that shows people that I'm just living my everyday life like anyone is. Yeah, my everyday life might look different because of my job situation, but I'm not you don't have to be traveling all over the place and going to a new country every month just to have this, see the beauty and see the magic in life. And so I do enjoy that, and I do enjoy documenting that. But I think that my long-term goal is I want to build a home, and this is where my home is, and I haven't found where that will be yet.
Do you have to take steps
branch out from there?
Do you think you'll have to take steps to that? Because you went from, being in that home with that huge family, you're around a small community for a majority of your youth, and then you're taking steps to kind of branch away and explore. Do you think you'll then have to take steps back to go back to planting roots in one area, not, you know what I mean? Kind of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that living in Albania in the same town for the last 5.5 years, I kind of have started that. And would there be some changes in the way that the culture and the economy and all of these things in Albania, if there were some changes there, I could see that being my long-term home. However, I don't foresee that. Maybe a few more years, I don't know exactly. But when I think about, do I want to spend the next 20, 30 years in this place, the way that the country operates is not something that I want to. I have headaches and frustrations that happen on a almost daily basis that I don't want to have to deal with.
Really?
And I think that steps into other places are it'll just take some time to figure out the right situation. And I'm willing to give up some stuff because obviously I'm not in my own country, but there's certain mindsets in Albania. YouTube is really difficult to be successful at anywhere, but especially in Albania because there are no brands that are advertising on Google. And so if you watch my videos from Albania, there are almost no ads on them, which a large portion of my office or my audience is watching from Albania. Not only that, influencer marketing has not become a thing really in Albania, and when it is, it's not focused on the connection that an audience has with the person. It's focused sheerly on numbers. And so if let's say an energy drink wants to advertise to an audience in Albania, they go find some celebrity who has 100,000 followers, and she'll just put the drink next to her as she's taking a selfie, and that's her ad. Whereas if I worked with a cell phone company, for example, I could take my phone into the mountains and show people, hey, look, this is what this cell phone can do, right? And brands there, because my following is so small in comparison to some of the people that they have access to, they don't think about that, because their mindset is a little bit, it has to catch up. So in the US, even at a few thousand followers, you could in theory be getting brand deals, or you could get paid to do brand stuff if you have the right fit, if the brand agrees with how you fit, and if you pitch to them correctly. But I can't pitch to people because they won't give me the time of day, because they don't see how I can benefit them, despite having I mean, it's not a small audience, but a decent sized audience, and more or less a monopoly on this is information for people that are traveling into Albania. And so what I've done is, back in September, I shifted my content away from Albania tourism stuff, because I'm slowly preparing myself and preparing anyone who watches my stuff to the idea that I may not be in Albania forever. And so if you're following me just because I live in Albania and make videos for Albania, that may not last very long. And so the last 3 or 4 videos that have been in the US have kind of been an experiment of, this is what I'll be making. And yeah, sometimes I'll be in Albania because that's where I live right now. But that storyline in the story of my life and my YouTube channel, that storyline will come to an end and another one will start. Maybe it's living in Italy, maybe it's living in Montenegro, I don't know. And so I have these kind of storylines that I'm working through, and it's just, they're storylines that are happening to me in my life. And so I've settled to the idea that I will put roots somewhere. I've decided that I learned pretty quickly in 2017. I did a 5-week trip through Europe and was bouncing around from place to place. And I thought, that's exhausting. I don't want to do that. Here, I've been in the US now for 2 months. I'm about to go back to Albania tomorrow. And I've been bouncing around. I haven't spent I spent 2 weeks in Moscow, or 12 days in Moscow in Idaho when I first got here. And since then, I haven't been in the same place for 5 days in a row. Wow. So it's kind of jumping, and it's exhausting. Wow. So I like to have my setup, and the content that I can make that people can expect. And then I treat myself, and maybe the views drop a bit, but I treat myself to a trip. I document that trip and I show that trip, because that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy all of it, but I really like that. Right. Yeah, and so if I do that a couple times a year, that's enough for me at this point. Mm-hmm. But I think part of it is because I live outside of the US, I have the traveling feeling almost every day, because I have to learn how to communicate to this person in my broken Albanian that I can speak, which is not fluent by any stretch of the imagination, but I can usually communicate enough, or I have to deal with this thing or that thing or whatever. And it's enough, like I said, the steps outside of my comfort bubble every day is a little bit outside of what my comfort bubble is. And if I lived in the US, I would be very happily just inside this bubble of comfort. But because day-to-day interactions have to be with people or in situations that I'm not 100% comfortable in, it kind of gives me this feeling of, like, the excitement that I got from traveling, interacting with new people, problem solving, and how this is going to happen. What's this story going to end up like? That just happens to me naturally in my day-to-day life, because I live in a country that's not the one that I'm from.
So it's like, even though there's a comfort bubble in the United States, the inside of that comfort bubble isn't so comfortable. But then in Albania, where there's not that comfort bubble on the outside, on the inside there is that comfort. So it's almost the opposite of one or another. And wow, that
so when I have to shut off my brain, I go back to my apartment and I watch some YouTube, or I watch a movie or something, and I'm in my space. But as soon as I step out of that door,
Right.
I don't know what kind of thing I might have to interact with. Maybe it's some random person trying to speak to me that I can't understand what they're saying, or maybe it's some situation that I wouldn't have to do, just because life is so different there than it is here in the US, that just on a daily basis I'm doing something that's different. I'm doing something that's slightly outside of my comfort zone.
What's the major difference between Albania and here?
Well,
Like
a
the way I
macro
live.
view is a macro view is the major difference is that they were a communist country for 40 years, closed off to the rest of the world until 1991 or 1990. I forget exactly which one. And there's still remnants of that. You know, still a number of the people my age were children during communism, you know, and so people that I interact with, I have coworkers that are just slightly older than me, and they remember things in communism, and so that there's certain mindsets and the way, like cultural things, that to me I'm like, this makes no sense. Why do you do things this way? And the answer is, well, that's how it is in Albania. And they could say the same thing when they come to the US. Why does everyone drive a car? Why can't you walk from your house to the grocery store? Well, it's zoning laws. It's how it is in America, you know, that kind of thing. And it's just, I mean, I think it's because I spent 26 years in the US that going somewhere else, it's like, oh, okay, it feels wrong to me, but just because it's the way they do it doesn't mean that it's actually wrong. You know, it's just how their culture operates. It's how their culture does things. The way you interact with people, you know, they're mostly very like kind, and they're Americans have this reputation. People from the US have this reputation of being very blunt and upfront. And if you have a problem with me, you just tell me that problem. In Albania, they don't do that because that's disrespectful to you, and it brings disrespect on me, and it brings disrespect on my family. And so
Really?
I'll just pretend like everything is okay and not say anything to you at all. But somewhere in the background, you feel this division, or they'll badmouth you to somebody else, but not ever say anything to you to your face. These kinds of things that to me, I'm just like, if I have an issue with someone, well, exactly. So if I have an issue with someone, I'll go to them and just tell them to their face, hey, or if I feel like they have an issue with me. And oftentimes it's, oh, no, don't worry. But I have some American friends that I have done that to, or friends that have lived in the US that I've done that to, and they're that live in Albania now. And it opens up this conversation, and it heals whatever damage that had happened, because I was willing to be uncomfortable enough to be like, okay, there's an issue here. There's a coldness here that there didn't used to be. Why? You know, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe you did something wrong. I don't know, but I want to talk about this to figure it out.
Yeah, let's fix it.
Yeah, and Albanians, not all of them, obviously, I'm speaking in generalizations, tend to be non-confrontational. They tend to avoid conflict. They tend to any conflict that like actually matters about, or that's actually, you know, could have a issue. So there's times where they'll argue about politics all the time. So there'll be conflict. But when it comes to like damaging relationship, the seeming like we're okay is far more important than actually being okay. And that kind of feeds into this whole idea of appearance and how much emphasis there is on appearance, of making sure your car is shiny, making sure you're wearing nice clothes, even if the inside of your house is falling apart because you don't have the money for it. It's better that your appearance looks put together and looks good. And that's something that I don't care how I'm dressed. I care about what's going on in my head, what's going on in my heart. And, you know, at the end of the day, if I have enough money in my bank account to pay for my life, you know, I don't care if you think that I look frumpy when I'm walking down the street in a double XL sweatshirt, thinking that I don't have enough money to buy a nicer sweatshirt. No, maybe I do. I'm just using that money for something else that I place a higher priority on. And so these are just little things that are differences that, to me, it can get so frustrating. But then I also have to understand I'm living in their country. I have to kind of participate in their culture to a certain extent, until there are things where I'm like, no, this is dumb. This is ruining relationships. So I'll wear my baggy t-shirt if I want, or my wrinkled sweatshirt or whatever. But if there are people that are gonna not let this interaction happen because they have an issue with me, I'm going to call it out. And they might be uncomfortable, but I want to be able to walk away with a clean conscience of, I tried to repair this and it didn't work. Therefore, I can't do anything else.
Do they
the ball's in their court now?
Do they so do you, being that way in that culture, does that bring a lot of animosity towards your direction, or is there a lot of admiration? Like, how do they take that? You don't know?
Because they wouldn't tell me to my face.
They just don't. They just don't say.
Right.
Wow.
But I can only look out for myself, and so if I go and confront somebody about something, and I don't, if I confront someone about something, I can walk away knowing that I'm okay with the situation. If they don't want to extend their olive branch to figure it out, or if maybe I'm extending the olive branch and they don't want to grab it, well, that's on them. But I've extended it, and it remains extended forever. You know, if they don't want to do anything about it, that's fine. But I can go away, because at the end of the day, I have to live with myself. I have to live in my own head in my own apartment. And if they hate me, it doesn't have any effect on my life.
Right. It's like,
as long as I know I'm okay.
Yeah, it's like what I always say to the community. If I give somebody 150%, it's the same way as you. You're given 150% by extending that olive branch. If they don't want to take it, you can. Hey, I did my 150%, and if it doesn't make you want to give me 125 back, then we can, I can walk away just fine, no problem.
Right.
Do they like you said you have broken Albanian, and I know we just have a couple minutes whenever you need to go.
We can go a bit longer than an hour. It's fine. I'm not in any, I just have to do some things before I leave
yeah, totally
the US, and so can't sit here all day.
No, totally understand. Just let me know whenever. But broken language, different culture, they handle social interactions in a different way. How do you get treated over there?
Overall, Americans are treated with a lot of respect.
Okay.
The Albanian culture looks up to the American culture. Many Albanians wish they could live in the United States. And so first and foremost, me just having a United States passport. And, not that I show my passport, but they know that I'm a US citizen. Mm-hmm. It gets me this level of respect from people that don't know me at all. I'll get pulled over sometimes. I show them my driver's license. It says Alabama, United States of America, and they forget that they pulled me over for something, and they just want to talk about, oh, I have a son that lives in America, or I have a daughter that lives in America. Why are you in Albania? It shifts the whole conversation, which to me means I wasn't really doing anything wrong. They just wanted to pull me over for whatever reason. So overall, Americans are treated very respectfully, very kindly. I think that once you get further into things, since I've lived there for so long, I've kind of lost some of that like natural, oh, you're American, so just because of that, we're going to respect you. You live here now, and so we're going to treat you kind of the same as we treat other people, which is what I would prefer. It's it's fine. But that then means that I personally will get treated in ways that maybe aren't the best, but that I know that that's kind of how people treat other people. And so people stealing my photos or my video footage for their own purposes, and then when I call them out on it, they pretend they're like, oh, but I thought we were friends, can't I use this? And I was, no, it doesn't matter if we're friends, that's still intellectual property theft. Like, at the very least, you could ask me to use it, and maybe I say yes. But now that you've done it without asking, I'm going to tell you have to pay me money, or else I'm going to copyright, like this kind of thing, because you're stealing from me. Or shooting video for people that I won't name in this stream, but and then not getting paid for it. It's been almost 5 years, and I still haven't gotten paid for this video that this guy asked me to shoot, and he rushed me. And so I'm like, okay, me being a kind person, yeah, you can pay me afterwards. And now the guy I see him in the street and he avoids me. He doesn't want to talk to me. He doesn't want to interact with me because he knows he owes me money, but I'm not going to be, chasing him down for $100. It doesn't really matter that much to me. But sorry, I think that that's because I've lived there. So in their mind, I'm close enough to one of them that, and this is people that I interact with on a more regular basis. Because I'm more one of them, they're going to treat me more like one of them. Even though they're still, well, you are American. Oh, you don't speak our language fluently. So there's still this like a little bit of separation from it. I also think that there are, like if I go into a shop that I've never been in before and I speak some Albanian to the shop owner, he's going to be very excited that if he doesn't know who I am, or if I'm in a different city, they get very excited that who am obviously a foreigner based on how I look, how I dress, how tall I am. And they can probably tell by my pronunciation of their words. They can understand what I'm saying, but they're like, oh, that's not a native speaker, just like we can with English usually. They get excited just for the fact that I'm trying to speak their language. And so then they're very kind, they're very hospitable, this kind of thing. But I think that there's this point where, okay, you've been here long enough, you're no longer a guest in our country, and so we don't really have to treat you with the same amount of kindness and same amount of kindness that we would treat a different guest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. The more time goes, the more they get used to you being there. Is that why you think that like you said, you might transition to like Italy or something after a few years? Do you think that, so you're not quite sure where you're going to end up, but do you know it's not going to be in the US? It's going to be overseas somewhere? Or do you don't know, even it could be the US even at the end?
Yeah, it could be. I can't tell you 100% it would not be in the US.
Wow.
For me, it's about the situational opportunity. So right now I work for a nonprofit. I work full-time for a nonprofit in Albania. I also work for their US office that raises money in the US. So I have those. They're both remote work. So I can do those from home and then spend my time, any extra time that I have, working on my own brand, my own apparel company that I'm working on, my own YouTube videos, this kind of thing, grow my own audience. If I had a situation like that somewhere else, then that's why that's a reason why I would switch to something else. So if in the US, if someone was like, if there was a company that was like, okay, you work for this many hours a week, we pay you this much, but you don't ever have to come into our office. Well, I guess in theory, I wouldn't even have to go to the US, but let's say they said I had to be in the same time zone. I might consider that if they give me the time and the space to work on my thing, because my thing is my passion. It's what I want to be doing. I want to be telling stories, telling the story of my life. And the goal is that when my life is done, you can go back and you can watch basically a TV show of what I've done over the next however many years. And so that's my life's work. That's my life. That's the art that I want to put into the world and then leave behind. And I will never move to an opportunity that doesn't allow me the time that I need to do that. So the ideal situation is I build that and what I call YouTube and YouTube adjacent income. So anything that kind of fits in that general branding, YouTube, Patreon, apparel brand, any kinds of brand deals, any kinds of these things that are, if I can build that to be sustaining for my life, that would be the ideal situation. However, I know that it's not often that can happen. It's, people often have to do other things to be able to make that work. And so I'm also very happy to do something else to make that work. Now that other thing has to allow for me to continue to work on this thing, because that's what I consider my life work to be. And so right now where I am, they allow for that. If I came to the US, they would also have to allow for that. which may or may not happen. So I wouldn't look to the US initially for something, but I wouldn't be completely against. It just has to be the perfect situation for me to continue on the trajectory that I want to continue on.
So
And
you
I
might,
think that would be easier because if I moved to Italy, I could maintain most of the work that I do now, and I could live in Italy, and it's a little bit higher cost of living, but I would be able to kind of balance what I'm doing and live in Italy. But if I wouldn't go to Germany because I wouldn't be able to balance the things. I wouldn't go to the UK because I wouldn't be able to balance the things. I would have to go and find another job doing something completely different just to pay for my life. When the whole time, what I really want to be doing, what I feel like I should be doing, is telling the
do it.
story of my life and how it can help other people and how it can inspire other people to see the beauty in the mundane.
Man, that's interesting. So the so the so living so from 6 to 18 living in Moscow, is that what kind of got you to this whole point in your life with basically I mean it's got to be hard to even because if it's based off of what both of those things being able to be available for you to continue do you think you'll ever find that place at the end that you grow roots in, and or is it
I
just
don't know.
it's a dream, but if it happens it happens, if not
Life is a journey, and that's the journey that I'm on, and I mean
right.
that's the journey that I document. And so I I am drawn to, I'm going to go into YouTube meta stuff real quick. I'm drawn to YouTube people who um, are showing a journey that they're embarking on. There's a guy that I love watching. He lives in the Berkshires up in Massachusetts. His YouTube name is Trout and Coffee. And he just documents the progress of what he and his girlfriend are doing, building their house, building their off-grid cabin, renovating this thing, doing that thing. And I love that because I know that each week I get the next piece of the story. And what's fun about it is he doesn't know where the story's going, and I, as the audience member, don't know where the story's going. If you watch a network TV show, all the writers, all the actors, they know where the story's going. They know what's going to happen. But this guy, I watch his videos and I go back and watch his old videos, and I see him hoping for things, speaking things into existence, or manifesting things back early that I see him accomplishing now. And so that's what I like seeing. And so then to me, that's what I will be doing, because this is my life. This is how I'm showing you my life. And some people will relate to some aspects of it. Some people will relate to other aspects of it. I think that, but if I'm honestly, authentically showing the life that I'm living, the struggles that I'm going through, the trauma that I have to face and confront, people can connect with that. You and someone else, at least one other person, shared the video that I made from Moscow, and that video, bumped up dramatically in views. But to me, what matters more is the number of subscribers that went up, because those people related to what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And they connected with it. Wasn't a video that's like, how do I go viral so that people will watch this video? It's like, no, this is very deeply intimate, personal side of my life. You see my brother's house, my nieces and nephews running around, and no one's going to subscribe to that unless they really connect with that thing. They're not going to subscribe to a channel just because I talked about trying to overcome trauma. That's not enough to get someone just to press the subscribe button.
Mm-hmm.
What is the connection that they can feel with me and with what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And I don't know what kind of impact I can have on those people's lives, but I hope that it's a positive one.
Oh, I mean,
moving forward, different aspects of my life will be able to do that to different people.
That's why I reached out to you in email, because when I watched that video and I was thinking it was something else, and I watched that video and it hit home with me when I reached out to you that first email, and I was like, damn, this is wow. The strength and the courage, and I kind of, even though you have your story, I could see my story in your story, and that's where I got the connection, and then that's when I instantly reached out to you, and I was like, yo, like, this is what a story. And I suppose, I with some of the things that you've talked about with your childhood earlier, and then when you went back to Moscow, you had said that you had some healing with siblings and some of your old friends,
Mhm.
about your experiences, and one thing that stuck out to me that you said was that you guys were able to, they validated experiences, but you had said something like, you could agree to disagree, but maybe not 10 years ago it wouldn't have been possible, and that
Right.
stuck out to me. What is that what took so long, is because you felt that the agree to disagree wouldn't have taken place for so
I
long, or
think I think part of it was me growing and maturing. I think that I was the one that thought, okay, I need to what they're like where they live is not a great place. The environment that they're in is not great, and so they should leave. And it took me a long time, maybe 5 years after moving away from Moscow, to realize that if that person is happy, especially with a sibling of mine, where they are, uh, I feel like it's my duty to tell them why the cautions that I would have about living in that place.
mm,
If they as long as it's the same as extending the olive branch to someone in Albania that doesn't. It's, here's what I have, you can take it or leave it. You can ignore everything. I hope that you would listen to it and think about it, but I'm not going to try to convince you to live your life a certain way or not. Just here's something to think about, here's something to chew on as you're considering whether you live here or live there or whatever it is. So
mm.
that was part of it, where I used to think that I needed to convince them that my way was the best way, um, which is just an immature way of thinking. Um, and then on top of that, I think that I needed to get to a point where I was fully, maybe not 100%, but close to fully healed from my experiences, that I could go back and look at it in a light, in a more objective light, instead of, I went to a small Christian school out there for high school, and instead of saying, "Oh, this Christian school was awful," I can step away and say, "Okay, these particular teachers treated me poorly. It's been 15 years or 13 years or whatever since I was in that school. So because my nieces and nephews um, might go to a school there, that school, it doesn't mean that they'll have the same experience as I do."
Right. Wow,
So
so it had to be
I
pretty
I had
powerful.
to yeah, I had to step away from it and look at it, kind of removing my own um, experience from it, and look at my experience from the outside almost, and think, okay, this is there. It doesn't discredit my experience, but I have to understand that everyone's experiences are unique, and so even people that were at the school at the same time as I was, possibly had a good experience and I didn't. Um, and so to now then go back and say, "Oh, what you're doing is wrong. Where you live isn't the right place. Where your kids go to school, it's a bad school." It's ridiculous to think that, because it's if I've changed in those 10, 12 years, I can't. Who's to say that that place hasn't? Who's to say
Uh,
that the people there haven't?
did they treat you? Did they treat you like an outsider? I know how they are when it comes to outsiders. Did they treat you like one since your family came from Alabama and then moved up
Like
there? Is that
when
where
we first went up there,
yeah, is that where it like started from? Is like just
I
because you
I
guys
don't
were from,
know.
no?
I think there were just people in authority that had fragile egos, and they had to take it out on 15-year-olds in the school.
Mm,
Um, I the only time I felt like I was treated like an outsider was when I was actively um, protesting on the internet about how certain things were going on. So the way certain things were happening out there. And when I stopped doing that, because I realized that doesn't really help anybody. If someone wants to come to me and ask me my opinion, I can tell them. But if just throwing something on Twitter or throwing something on Facebook is not going to convince anybody of anything.
Right.
And so when I stopped doing that, so I think that it's the community out there that when they felt like I was no longer attacking them, then they were willing to
Oh my God.
treat me normally, kind of. It's a whole big thing
No
that
wonder.
we can get into on another
Yeah, just with that
conversation
answer.
sometime.
Yeah, just with that answer, I was like, oh my gosh, now I understand everything that you've been saying and discussing where you're coming from this whole time. Like,
Yeah.
because not only small community, the town itself, then small community, even smaller because of the just having the 1,500 community of the church, and then even smaller than that, because if that is what was taking place, I'm sure, because who wants to be associated with that, because then that happens to them too. So I'm sure there was a lot of, I'm sure your circle shrunk even more than that,
Right.
when that was
So
taking place. Wow.
for me to be able to go back and have conversations with my sister
Wow.
and my brother and some friends of mine that I can
Oh,
tell
man.
them objectively, no longer subjectively, I can tell them objectively, this is the perception of this place. This is what I think about it. As long as you know that, taking my experience out of it, this is maybe a bit of subjectiveness where this is what my experience was, but just because of that doesn't mean that you shouldn't or can't or whatever be here. That's fine. Just know that this is where I come from, and that means that because it happened, it's likely, and you're in the same place, it's likely that it may happen. Likely is the wrong word. Possible. It's possible that it may happen again. And when they say, okay, great, thanks for your concern, then I drop it and I'm done. I've done what I need to do.
Right.
In my conviction, I've done what my conscience has told me I need to do.
Right.
And so being able to talk to my sister and ask her, why are you friends with this person? Why do you go to do this thing? And she can give me her reasoning, and I can give her my experience with that person. And she can say, oh, that's unfortunate, and acknowledge, yeah, maybe that person is not the best at this, that, or the other thing.
But it doesn't come between you two.
But
That's
it doesn't
important.
come between us.
Yeah,
And we both realize that we can have different experiences with the same third person.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I would love to. I know you have to run. You got to get back on your trip back home.
Yeah.
Man, I would love anytime that you want to get together again. I would love to talk more. What an interesting story. And I'm definitely going to be. I just watched your the video with the snow, the record snow, the snow video there. Started watching that one. So if anybody's not subscribed, definitely go subscribe. Here's the channel again. Amazing story. I can't imagine with the 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes here. I really like, before, when I started this episode, when I came across your video, I was like, wow, the courage and strength. But just with what you've said in the last 5 minutes, man, I can't imagine the courage and strength you had to muster up just to go back to do that, man. That is,
I will say this.
shout out to you, man.
Thank you. That video that I uploaded from Idaho is, I think it's 12 minutes, in which I tried to capture the last 22 years, 24 years. I don't remember how old am I now. So I moved there when I was 6. So the last 25 years. In 12 minutes, I tried to capture what I've gone through, and then what I've gone through to move on from that.
You did a great job.
Obviously can't go into much detail. And I purposely didn't want to go into much detail, just because, again, it's very far removed from my experiences. Things are different now. But there's so much more there, so much more underlying of where that story came from. There were people in my comments that were not happy that I didn't mention specifics, and I responded to them in that maybe I didn't, but my response to them would be, yeah, that's not the story anymore. The story is not what happened to me. The story is now how I've healed from it. And so I don't need to tell you about the exact details of where my trauma came from. I'll tell you about the forgiveness or the healing that I've gone through since then.
Yeah. Amazing, man. Like, I'm so glad. Shout out to Once Upon a Crime Time. Shout out Tommy. He was the channel that I came across your video on, and then after I saw that, it hit me, and then I went to your channel and watched it again, and I was just like, wow. And just the strength and the courage, just to even go back and do that, just to exist there, just to drive down that same road. I can imagine it was a lot of stuff rushing back. So I want to say thank you. I appreciate your time and your sharing some of your story.
Yeah, of course.
Safe travels. Let me
Thank
know
you.
anytime. Anytime is a good time for me.
Yeah, let's
I would
reconnect
definitely
in
love
a
to.
couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure, man. And you do. I want to say, like, whenever it comes to your videos, you have such a great cinematic presentation, not only with the music, the shots that you take. You definitely have a talent and a gift, and I'm glad, and just for you as your soul, I'm happy that you're able to fulfill those things that you have a passion for, because that's the true enjoyment in life. And so anytime another soul is able to enjoy that, it's always a bonus on this planet. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Definitely go sub, and watch those videos. It's a very interesting story, and there's a lot of different videos on there. How long have you been doing it? How long have you been doing YouTube for?
I uploaded my first videos in 2014, so it's been 10 years.
Wow, 10 years. Yeah, there's good stuff.
People talk about YouTube being a long game, and it took them a year to get 10, 20, 30,000 subs, and I'm like, oh, don't talk to me about the long game.
Shit. Yeah, it is a process. Yeah. But thank you so much, man. Safe travels. Thank you. If you want to reach out, let me know you made it safe. I'll let the community know. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a peaceful and positive evening, and thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right, see you.
See you later. Thank you.
for?